You're listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we're featuring Redefining Success, a session that was presented at Children's Institute 2024 in New Orleans.
All right, y'all, this is, in case this did not give it away, this is Redefining Success. Happy first morning panel to us all. We did it. We made it. You're out of bed. I hope you have your beverage of choice. I'll be one of the 1,000 reminders to drink lots of water during your institute. Stay hydrated. My name is Hannah Oliver Depp. I'm the co-owner of Loyalty Bookstores in Washington, D.C. and in Maryland. And oh, there we go. Hello. Let there be light. Amazing. And we're going to discuss redefining success, which we have to do because we sell books. Bear with me through some housekeeping, but it is important. Please note that you can get our slide deck and check out the program, figure out how to contact us afterwards if you go into the app or in the program page of the website. Please evaluate all your sessions. As someone who's been on the education committee with the ABA, the session evaluations are huge to help define what happens next time. So if you loved it and you want more, if you hated it and you never want to see it again, if you were like, that's not what I thought I was getting into, all of that feedback is hugely valuable. So please help the staff make the best institute possible and do your evaluations. Please note that this is being recorded and will be posted on BookWeb and ABA's book education podcast, Booked. So please, when we do Q&A, use the microphones if you're able, flag someone down if you need them brought to you. Please silence our magic boxes, cell phones, etc. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand and wait for one of our wonderful room minders to bring you the mic because, again, it's being recorded and accessibility matters. Antitrust guidelines. Don't break the law, even if it was created by Ronald Reagan. There can be no discussion of pricing or policies, no discussion of boycotts, no discussion of dividing up a market. I don't know why they think we're going to be able to do this. Again, we're booksellers. This is for the Sherman Antitrust Act and to make sure that we get to keep doing this. So don't break the rules. All right. Whew. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Bookstores have obvious indicators of success. Businesses in the black. Doors opened on time. New customers walking through the door. Regular customers returning. Events being attended. Books being sold at said events. However, there's a lot of measurements of success that exist outside of that. And in fact, the longer I do this business, the more that those things are a tool in order to make what I consider success actually happen. We're talking about benchmarks that we have come across for success that help us keep opening the doors, creating teams that like to show up to work, communities that have strong buy-in. And so we're going to talk about what's been working for us, things that we have been reevaluating, obviously what happened in the panorama that has made us change perhaps change our hearts and minds or redefine our goals. And we're also going to leave a lot of time for conversation as well, both for us and for all of y'all. Again, I'm going to go down. The only super formal part of this is that we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to jump into questions. But just a little bit about Loyalty. We started out as a pop-up in 2018, and now we have 2 locations. One is in collaboration in my original hometown, Silver Spring, Maryland, and it is in collaboration with a coffee shop, record store, and analog market with local makers who have little stalls and stands. And then we have a standalone shop in the Petworth neighborhood of Washington, D.C., my other home. And they're literally 20 minutes from each other, but if you know anything about D.C., people are like, I can't cross the line. So they each have their own unique communities, but a lot of overlap. I have 3 full-time staff and a lot of part-time staff who piece together, as well as a lot of community buy-in. We're really lucky. We focus entirely on what once upon a time was called diverse books, but everyone realized that word got drained of meaning. So we focus on I am Black, queer, adoptee, neurodivergent. The co-owner of my store is Filipina, queer, physically disabled, and we try to make sure that the books reflect that for our staff, the community, and everything. So we have a couple token straight white dudes as opposed to it being flipped the opposite way around.
One time.
Hey, Richard Powers just writes really beautifully about trees. That's how I got on the shelves. So we kind of like to say as a shorthand, if it is a special month, it's the main focus of our store. So we have about 500 square feet in the partnership store and 900 in the about 700 of which is selling space. So that's a brief overview of my spot. I promised Bunnie I wouldn't start with her. So Rebekah, would you introduce yourself and a bit about the Boogie Down?
Absolutely. So I'm Rebekah Shoaf, and I'm the founder and owner of Boogie Down Books in New York City. We are a bookstore without walls for kids, teens, families, and educators in the Bronx and beyond. Our core values are joy, justice, and community.
Thanks, love.
I'm like, I don't need notes to talk about myself. I don't think so. Okay. I'm Haidas. I am the founder and owner of Belonging Books, based in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I got a whoop. Okay. All right. Belonging Books is a community program provider and a pop-up bookstore centering the voices and stories of people of color and other underrepresented communities on the Cape. I create and hold space for celebration, joy, rest, and connection for those communities.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bunnie Hilliard. I'm the founder-owner at Brave and Kind Books. We are primarily a children's bookstore nestled in the Oakhurst neighborhood of Decatur, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got one.
You got? I told you.
But we serve the greater Atlanta, or Hotlanta. You're actually not allowed to say Hotlanta, but I'm going to say it anyway.
But everyone note that, please. Yes.
So our mission is to celebrate and center representation in our collection of stories for the people that we want to raise and be in the world. I too have had to redefine and massage the word diversity, as that has become to mean something less different. Anyway, and so our core values are belonging, integrity, and joy, and that just means we're creating a space where everyone feels welcome and seen. That we operate in a way that is with integrity with our partners, in our community, and that we find stories that celebrate and elevate joy in the stories that we share and the events that we try to put on for our community. And that's what I got. So
for each of you, you have very different physical spaces, right? Your bookstore without walls, pop-up, you're physically located. When you started out, were you like, I'm going to have a brick and mortar, it's going to have 4 walls, it's going to be XYZ? Was that intentionally not what happened, or did life happen? Talk a little bit about it. Yeah, go for it.
So when the idea, the calling came to me, I guess it would be January 21. I don't know how familiar you all are with Cape Cod. It is, according to the census, which has its things, but let's just use that right now. It's approximately like 90% white, 10% other things. So when I moved there from various cities, I grew up I lived in a lot of cities. I was drawn to cities.
Yeah.
And, I was surrounded by a lot of diversity. And when I got to Cape Cod, I was like, what is happening and what have I done? And that was life. That was my partner, my husband grew up there, la-da-da. So that's what brought me there. I had kids growing up there, and I realized there was a need, there was a hole. And when I thought about it, to answer the question, yeah, I was like, I have to have a brick and mortar. And it wasn't because of this idea of a traditional bookstore, right? I didn't really care about that. For me, it was all about carving that space in that landscape and decentering whiteness, honestly. So I think for me, I was like, no, must have space. And then you start doing the numbers, and you're like, okay, no space right now. So I focused on this pop-up model, always thinking I will have space. And as I've gone along, and Cape Cod is not, people cannot travel along the Cape. It's not a very accessible place to get around. So I'm the one who gets around, and it's really, really cool because now the entire Cape is my space, and I carve out the space wherever I go, right? And I've kind of flipped it on its head, and I think the only thing I'd add is down the road, if the time is right, if it makes sense, if I do have space, it would potentially most likely be collaborative space, sort of sounding like what your Silver Spring or Silver Silver Springs space is like. So, and I think that's mine.
I originally thought, 10 years ago when I was conceptualizing Boogie Down Books, that we would eventually become a brick and mortar space, and that was because that was all that I knew. And I wrote a business plan for a children's bookstore in my community and realized that there didn't seem to be a way for that to be financially viable, given the cost of commercial real estate in New York City. And so instead, I sort of got started the way that I could and thought eventually I would move into a brick and mortar space. But pretty soon it became apparent that not only was that not necessary, and not only would I be able to serve this vast community of 1.5 million people that did not have access to a children's bookstore nearby, but that having a brick and mortar location would not be aligned with my own core values as a human being, which are freedom, independence, and adventure. And I grew up, so simultaneously, I'm feeling at that time, this sort of, I don't want to say institutional, but sort of this pressure of the known world at the time, which is to be a real bookstore, I have to have a brick and mortar location. And also that's coming up against two other things. This creeping question for me of what is a bookstore anyway? I'm thinking about this, ruminating on this all the time and being can't a bookstore be wherever there are readers? And also this understanding deep within myself, having grown up in a family where my father worked for his family's brick and mortar retail business 60 hours a week, Monday through Saturday. He was gone before my siblings and I woke up in the morning, and he got home right before dinner. He worked on Saturdays. I knew I did not want that life for myself. And so this has been, or it became, an exploration for me of how to do the work in the community that I wanted to do and that I felt called to do, but also in a way that felt aligned with what I knew and know in myself I need in order to be happy in this one wild and precious life that I have. So that is how...
First Mary Oliver quote of the conference. Absolutely. As my definition of a bookstore is sort of the Holy Spirit, where two or more readers are gathered, a bookstore shall appear.
Yes. Yes.
You touching a book? You touching a reader.
So I guess I'm the other person who has a brick and mortar space. I'm starting to rethink my life choices.
At the end of this, Bunnie and I are giving up our leases. That's what's going to happen.
I know. So,
Get out your leases. No.
But I will say, the space that I came upon was really, it all happened very quickly, kind of within a 2 to 3 month period. I was dreaming up this idea and coming up with a business plan and having a conversation with another fellow woman business owner about how she had this idea, very different from mine. And now she's standing in this space, this community space that she created, and by the end of the conversation, she was offering me her space. And so at that moment, I felt like this is serendipitous, this is kismet, I'm supposed to be here. And so, we are nestled in this very white Oakhurst neighborhood of Decatur, Georgia. It's not too far from where I live, but people often ask me, how did I choose that space? And I often say that the space chose me. And so we are a Black-owned, woman-run bookstore in a space where most of the people that come into my store don't look like me, but they come in and they see all of these beautiful faces and stories and families that may look very different from their own, understanding that in diversity there's beauty and there is strength, and that this makes the world a better place by understanding that, by celebrating that, by incorporating that and highlighting that. So that's what happened. That's how it happened.
Hannah, can I ask the audience how many are in brick and mortar spaces and?
It's usually the majority.
Yeah.
In fact, when I started the pop-up in 2018, I was not remotely the first, but it was they were like, but you have a lease lined up, right? And I was like, I don't know when that's going to happen. It actually very similarly, I walked into a space and the person was like, I'm going to have to close my bookstore. And I was like, I take it. It worked out. But it was a white-owned bookstore in the neighborhood that I had grown up in, and they had done a lot of attempts to work within the community, and that all best intentions aside, it hadn't taken. And I was like, I got this. So it was similarly serendipitous to come to it, but I was like, there would not have been probably a way for me to get a lease otherwise without that moment. But I think so much of this, you all introduced, yourselves and your stores with a bit of mission, right? And you had a way of saying your core values fairly quickly. It's kind of it sounds very corporate-y speak to be like, what's the elevator pitch for your bookstore, right? Blech. But also, can you define your bookstore? Have you written down whether you are frontline bookselling, or you are the owner, or you are, anywhere in the myriad of things, or like all of us are, I was like, I do the trash every day. It doesn't matter that my name's on the lease. That's not how bookselling works. So I think it's really important. Can you define your store's mission statement? Because pretty much how you define success will have a lot to do with how you define your mission. And if you do not know what that mission is, or you're finding yourself struggling, regardless of coffee intake, to define your business and your mission, then you might have some issues, because you will feel the pressure to, okay, I have to do this, and I have to achieve this, and I have to do all these benchmarks that turns out have nothing to do with how you're actually, why you open the doors every day, however you open the doors every day. Did you start out with your mission? And again, did that core value, did that mission statement change? And how have your core values evolved in faced with the reality of running the operation? There's a lot of nodding, Bunnie.
I know. It's like hard swallowing, nodding. Deep breaths.
I can share the idea of core values was something that was already very much part of my practice as a human and as a professional. I have a background in public education in New York City, and the idea of core values was already something that I was working with, and so identifying core values for Boogie Down Books was fairly early in the process. I would say, though, that something that has been a real push for me in interesting and challenging ways is to think about how I'm operationalizing those core values so that they are not just a sentence on our website or a thing I say in settings like this, but that actually it's the joy, justice, and community. That's the litmus test by which I and my team make decisions in every facet of the business, who we work with, what we do, what we say yes to, what we say no to. big decisions that I make about, the future of the business and how we infuse our offerings, what books we sell, because when you are everybody, no matter their size, I suppose, makes decisions about what you will and will not be able to carry.
Yeah.
And so so the core values, again, it's not just like an affirmation. It's not the equivalent of, a Post-it on my refrigerator. It's a tool. It's a test by which I aspire to live by every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, operationalizing is the word for it, because a core value is a core value until you go, wait, but what does that actually look like?
Right. So we can do it. We can, I think I was saying earlier, belonging, like that's always going to be paramount. The people that work for me, the people that come into our store, they're always going to feel like they belong there. And by the stories that they see, the people that they meet, the people that are helping them when they come into the door, that's easy for us to do, because it's important to us. Integrity. At the end of the day, I feel good about the decisions I make for my staff, for myself, for my community. And what was that last thing? Yeah. But even with all of those things, and joy was the third thing. Those things all feel good. They're very easy for me to operationally make those kinds of decisions for our business. Now, do those things translate into dollars every time? Is that the proper way to financially run a business? That's the real question. Do those three things keep the lights on? Not necessarily, if I'm being quite honest, because those things, they sound important. They're important to us. The community says they're important, and when we display those things to them in the curation that we share, I feel like those things used to be very important. And as time progresses, I can see they look and feel sometimes less important. So how do we, I guess, reconfigure that in a way where we still get to do the things that feel good and right, but translate into a way for us to successfully financially run our business?
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah. We're going to get into it. Okay. Yeah.
I'll just add, I think core values, sometimes I don't like saying this, especially in a room full of booksellers at a bookseller conference, but I always think of Belonging Books as sort of this platform for me to do the work that I want to do, whether it's in that racial equity space or community advocacy space, and almost like the book selling aspect is the symbolic aspect of what I do. So that's where I'm symbolically centering, amplifying these voices and stories. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I always lead with, I'm a community program provider. Like, that's what I start with. And so that means, I think, in my decision making, where I don't want to call out Cliff from Left Bank, but he was saying yesterday that he's a yes man, say yes to everything, and I am very much a yes person, right? Like, that's how I'm built. But since I've been doing this, everything has to be super intentional, I think is the word. I think about, who I'm partnering with, who I'm collaborating with, because I have to do a lot of I want to do a lot of collaborations. That's how I kind of run, really. And I think that, I'll create BIPOC-centered spaces for book clubs or for writing circles. And again, I told you the demographic of Cape Cod, so people will come and say, oh, I'd love to come to your book club. And I say, okay, I explain to them, this is the space I'm creating, this is why I'm creating it, and if you feel this is something you need, of course you're welcome. I will include you, the concept of inclusion. And so, and usually they don't. Usually they understand.
Well, we had a Well-Read Black Girl book club, which Well-Read Black Girl partnered with the American Bookselling Association to do kind of like sanctioned, Well-Read Black Girl pop-ups everywhere. And we had to not turn people away, but we were like, you're not the center of this space. Like, this space is literally designed to center Black folks and gender nonconforming folks. And it was, so I can come, but it's not going to be about me and what I'm learning by reading these books. I was like, no, there's a different book club for that. Yeah. You go to that one. I'm glad you're doing it, but this is not the space for that. And it was so much was about definitions. And I was like, being able to put the boundaries up to make the people who are at my core values feel safe and feel seen and feel free in my space, that was success for me. Yeah. That I could, within the surprises of the day, create the atmosphere I wanted in the bookstore. That was a huge success for me because I wasn't always in control of the space in other places I had worked. No matter what the intentions were, I hadn't been able to actualize safe spaces for people in the bookstores I had worked at. And I was able to do that. And that was a huge success for me. And I was like, that's it. That's what I'm doing. Because I am in a space that, I'm one neighborhood over. The gentrification has moved where the black neighborhoods are in Washington, D.C. aggressively. And so I was like, I was a lot about planting my flag here. I was like, I'm going to open up this space. No matter what else is happening in this neighborhood, I'm going to be here. But then also that meant my clientele did not look like my clientele did even in the 5 years I've been open. And so I was going, okay, well, who's still at the center of my space? And again, how am I going to continue to make sure? I was like, the freedom to put up boundaries, say no, or welcome people into a far more complicated conversation than they were prepared to have. They wanted their I'm a good white person cookie. They're not going to get that from me. We're going to have a conversation. Or the freedom to say, today is not the day for this conversation, actually. That freedom for me, and very much so for my booksellers, was a way of saying, this has been successful. Yeah. This experiment is successful. Awesome. I think what is success for a bookstore, just like a very easy question to answer. Jen put that slide in and I was like, oh no. So there's the stereotypical notion of success that we talked about. And I think, we don't have to spend too much time on it because it's the pressure. I have to have the brick and mortar, or I have to do X amount of turns. And I want to bend this question a little bit, not so much what is the stereotypical notion of success. I think we're all in this room because we have that and we know maybe that's not what we want to be aiming towards. I think instead I kind of want to talk about what benchmarks, how are you balancing? I need to keep the doors open. Right. I need to pay the people who have entrusted me with a part of their life to work at this bookstore. And I also have to be able to say no to things sometimes, or, because it's not aligned with my values. How are you all working your way through that? This is my big challenge. So solve it for me, please. Because there is a practical side to this, right? We may say, I don't want to necessarily have 17 locations and be the brand, but I think stability is a goal that I am working towards very aggressively. I have a plan for stability because I've been open for 5 years. It's been a pandemic almost the entire time. And so going okay, that's something I need to bring for my booksellers, for my community, is a bit of stability. So there's a practical side to this as well.
I love that you use the word stability. I was thinking sustainability as you were, paving the runway for this question. Sustainability as distinct from profitability when we think about this question. The thing that comes to mind for me is that I was committed from the beginning to paying my employees at least $25 an hour. And what that meant was that sometimes I did not pay myself. Yeah. But what it also eventually meant was that I said no to a lot of requests to do free things in our community. Free to the client or customer or host, right? Initially we had a huge story time program at a local cafe and community gathering space, and we did that for free. I paid my employees. I paid them for their prep time as well as for setup and cleanup time and the time that they spent actually delivering story time. It was a huge program. It brought in a lot of breakfast business for this cafe. We had authors coming. We had local celebrities coming and reading books to kids. And eventually I said to the cafe that we needed to be compensated for providing that service to the community, and they declined to do so. And so we stopped. partnering with them in that way. And now we do provide story time to different spaces in the community. We have an ongoing outdoor seasonal partnership that's happening right now. And those community partners pay us to provide story time to their community. And therefore it is sustainable for me to pay the people who do that labor and bring that book joy to kids at least $25 an hour, including their, prep and planning and setup and cleanup and actual story time, and sometimes their travel time too, which can be really significant in New York City.
Yeah, I would say.
And so, that was a really hard decision to make, right? And these are hard decisions, but again, this is what I mean by operationalizing a core value like justice, right? Is saying like, this is what I want to pay my team. And so I have to make hard decisions about who our partners are and what the terms of those partnerships are so that I can run this business in alignment with that core value in a way that is sustainable.
Yeah.
Other people might have made other decisions, and this is the way that I went. I'm not saying that it's the only way or the best way, but it's an example of how I am navigating the tension that you're talking about, Hannah.
I'm for it.
Yes.
I'm for it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and I think there's, if I'm going to actually go, in what ways did the pandemic influence your definition of success? Just like as a jumping off point, and let's keep rolling, but I think going like, a lot of opportunities presented themselves that 2 years later turned out to be, or 6 months later or whatever, for a lot of people in this room, whether it's because you had children's focused books or BIPOC focused books or whatever, they were like, oh, you should do this. And then, when that well dried up overnight and, okay, I don't need my cookie anymore, went away, going, okay, did that actually all align with my values? Why was I doing that? Just because I thought I had to? Because I was scared to say no? Because what I got to do it. What if the opportunity never comes? Well, what is that opportunity to your store and to your mission? And I think the pandemic forced me to make 700 pivots, if I never hear the word pivot again, that kept, in some cases, taking me further and further away when I thought, because they were making the business successful, they were leading me towards my goal, and they were actually pulling me away. They were distracting me away from my goal because I was scared to say no. So it definitely forced me to not necessarily even redefine success, but to go, every opportunity is not for my business because it's taking me away from my core value.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly was certainly a recipient of the roller coaster that was the pandemic, and went from thousands of orders for these books that I loved so much that now I was like, they care, it's and now we get to ship all of these beautiful books to these families, and we're really making a difference, right? Because that was what our mission was, to do just that, and we have had to, as the roller coaster started to make its way down, kind of pivot once again to the work that is meaningful to us in a way that still allows us to do that same thing. And so, we do things that where we are still allowed to share those same quantities in school, with schools and with bulk orders and things of that nature, but it feels different. As we are aiming to be a place of gathering and community that wasn't the initial plan. And so I'm not saying that as an answer. I'm saying that's where we stand. We're still redefining that in a way that allows us to push forward our mission to continue building and growing, doing the thing that is a reflection of our core values and our mission in a way that's meaningful.
I was going to kind of go back to the operationalizing of the core values, and I think for Belonging Books being essentially a one-person organization at this point, for me it's really about finding the right people to collaborate with, and finding those partnerships within, the schools, nonprofits that are value aligned with what I'm doing. And pretty soon after I got going, I did hook up with 3 other local organizations, and we formed a collective called the Arts and Justice Collective. And we ended up getting a large mass development grant for $90,000 to do. Yeah, it was a shit ton of work. It was nuts. It was essentially, we're all kind of grassroots, we're all starting our own things, and then we have this whole other project to do. But we got through it, and now we're on to so that money's, we did what we had to do, and we created these amazing community events for historically excluded, historically excluded community members, and then we're into our second year, and we're about to do another Arts and Justice Festival at the end of this month. And so for me, it's been really interesting because I'm not set up as a nonprofit, which I thought about, but for me, a lot of the partnerships and collaborations are nonprofits writing for grants and saying, who do I want to facilitate this book club for this Creative Futures art program that I'm doing? Oh, let's get Belonging Books to do it. And then I create those relationships and benefit from the grants that these organizations are getting that are value aligned with what I'm doing. So it's worked, and that's sort of what I've been. So I do sell books. I definitely sell books, but I just want to make that clear. But I think a lot of it for me has been the community programs that are driving that aspect of the revenue stream, so that I use the word sustainable. I can get into it later, but we had talked in our prep call about privilege and who can devote their lives to something like this, right? And that's something we can talk about if it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like on that, my last point before we open this all up is, how are you defining success? Are there achievable benchmarks that are redefined success for you? So mine, very practically, I hit one of my first benchmarks for a really, really hard time for my store last year when 2 of my full-time staff went to other jobs for other places. But that was actually a goal of mine. One of our core goals is we want to change the bookselling industry.
Right.
And very small, tiny little goal. So it was the store, I created the store, and I wanted to create a store that would have been a safe place for me to work at. And I was like, the way to do this is that booksellers will leave my store for better jobs in other stores in the industry. I want generational bookselling change to be happening. And so to watch 2 incredible people who are amazing go work for other stores and higher managerial positions that I didn't have for them is fantastic. That was a huge success. It was hard for me, but it was so good for the bigger project of what we're trying to do, and it was better for them. One thing I have learned from managing my store and other stores is when someone's ready to leave or move or grow, it's the best thing. And stifling that is bad for the store, and it's bad for them, and it's bad for you. But just bad. But I was like, this is a huge success that there are 2 people who were not, traditionally represented in this industry who now have better jobs elsewhere, right? So that was a big success for my store, and that was okay, all right, we did it. Next. And so okay, now I'm looking at how can I invest in, in the bookseller school? How can I make sure that people have that opportunity? Am I bringing them to enough conferences? Are they making connections outside of my store? Okay, I'm going to realign what we do as part of our basic training to make sure they're connected to the larger industry so they can see a pathway forward and grow. That's success for me in my store. So what are some of the very specific things that help you define success that outside of trying to stay in the black?
So I've been thinking about this. I think about this a lot, as maybe clear from what I've shared before, but I've been thinking about this in a new way lately because I recently activated my succession plan. And so I have been really thinking a lot about what that means. And I could talk about this for a long time. It's multifaceted. But the thing that I'll specifically share, because I think it directly relates to what you just said, Hannah, is when I started Boogie Down Books in the Bronx, a community of mostly Black and Latinx people, I was able to do so with relative ease as a white woman with an education background and a lot of access and resources at my disposal. Right. And as I think about what's next for Boogie Down Books, I don't think that I am the right person to be leading this community anymore. I think that I was the right person to get it going, but I think it is bigger than me at this point. It's a community, it's a movement, and my succession plan, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into detail about it because we are at step 0.5 right now. But part of it is very much, ensuring that people who are reflective of the community have the opportunity to become small business owners and to evolve Boogie Down Books into its next iteration in ways that I can't even imagine because of the limitations of my background and my experience and my identity. And so really thinking a lot about, we're getting the 10-minute warning, I think. Yeah. So really thinking a lot about what it means to not just operate this business, but now to sort of exit this business in alignment with the core values of joy, justice, and community is something that I have been thinking a lot about and continue to think a lot about, particularly in tension with what it means to be, executing a succession plan in a capitalist system.
Yeah.
Since we want to have Q&A and all that, I think I'll just say quickly, for me, it's little things like, it's really, this is going to sound so cheesy, but literally like the high school graduate, he's Vietnamese kid who comes up to me and, says, what I'm seeing, what you're doing is so meaningful. I had none of this growing up here on the Cape. It's so small, but on those days when I'm like, ooh, this is a lot. I can pull up that email or that thank you card or that, that memory, and that is it. That is what I find successful. One person, connecting with that one person and making sort of, sparking something in someone else, and think in the same breath I can say mentorship. Sort of, you're talking about your mentorship with, how you train your staff and have them grow their wings. And I think I love having those connections with the community members, particularly the younger folks.
So I'll say growing and developing a small, very tight-knit crew that has been with us since the start of it all. Yeah. So it feels like I must be doing something right. They're happy. They keep coming back. They want to be here.
That's huge.
We've had zero turnover, and it's been 5 years.
That's incredible. That's incredible, Bunnie.
And now to a place where everyone, we all wear all the hats, so everyone knows how to open, close, and essentially run our little bookshop. So I get to create a schedule for myself that doesn't require me to open and close the store, so that I can move forward and prioritize growing the business. So that feels successful.
Absolutely it is. And it can be something like that where it's like, okay, I need my life to look a certain way so I can keep this business afloat. How am I going to create a team that allows me to do that while also respecting their needs? It's absolutely true. All right. There's some core value things it doesn't matter if you're part-time or full-time, I want you to have a paid personal days. So how am I going to work the business so that that's possible? Because we all have stuff in life. and that stuff seems to be happening a lot more. So, thinking about those kinds of things. And I just want to say we're going to open it up for questions. So please raise your hand so we can, or go to the mic if you're able. But I do think that, even if you are, there's a lot of like ownership talk or management talk here. But if you're also frontline bookselling or working directly with your frontline booksellers, make sure that they also are part of these conversations. And if you are in that position, you should be part of these conversations.
Yeah.
So demand it. Yeah. And then we have another one right up here, too.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. It was very inspiring and encouraging as well. Kind of coming from the more corporate side of it, what made you decide and how was the process of leaving your corporate job or your job that you have full time to do this, to do your passion?
That's a good question. It's a great question.
I mean, I literally was a corporate lawyer, so I don't usually share that. I think for me it was very much circumstantial, but also I had already been trying to really extricate myself from that world, and I was in New York City. And so for me it was when my husband said, let's go do this restaurant thing on the Cape, I said, okay, let's do it. And I used it as my excuse. So I think the kind of the trigger for me to leave that world, I took it. It was a leap because that's what I knew. I'd done lots of education for it, and that's what I was, it was my skill. And I was a new mom. There was lots of stuff going on. And so I think that was that. But to find where I landed took a while. And I was with my family, with the kiddos for a while my husband got his business going. And I think what it did for me having that time, and I think for me it was really reconnecting with my priorities in life and understanding, back when I was a lawyer, I'd always be like, I don't want to do this. I want to be in public interest work. But I could never make the switch, make the jump. And I can, I like to work. It's just sort of how I'm built, which is why the law firm liked me. But now I get to do what I care about, and I can put all my passion and energy into it. But I do find myself, pausing because I have the young kids, and I say, oh, okay, I'm not going to go to that event. I'm going to hang out with my kiddos. And making those choices it's not always easy, but I wouldn't change it and for anything. And I think having the why, I guess, has changed who I am and how I approach life in the world. So I just go back to my why all the time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to jump in before we move to the next question? Okay.
I'll say my story is similar. I was at home with my kids and then I have a corporate background, I have a business degree, and when it came time to say, okay, girl, you're going back to work now, and so I asked one of my very good friends is a bookkeeper, and we were looking at the numbers, and she's like, girl, you're not going to make any money, right? Mm-hmm. Or what she also said, this could say you could make $1 billion and you could fall flat on your face, or it could say that you're not going to make any money and you could do very well for yourself. You have to decide if you're going to do it either way. And I asked myself, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail, and that was it for me. So
wow, that's
just
really
jump, and then leap in the net will appear. Still looking for that net.
We haven't hit the ground though. We haven't hit the ground though. We're still.
I haven't hit the ground yet, so we're gonna keep flapping. So.
My name is Kate, and I own Poe and Company Bookstore in Milton, Georgia, so not too far from Ravenkind Bookshop. But my question is twofold. How many part-time and full-time employees do you all have, and when did you start paying yourself?
Okay, so I want to go back to that absolutely. Everyone keep mentioning, because not being able to pay yourself is a weird privilege that we have to talk about with the plans for opening a bookstore that we get told. So how many part-time and full-time employees, if you do have them, and then when did you get to start paying yourself?
I'm the only full-time. I am and have always been the only full-time employee. At various times, I've had up to 3 part-time employees and other people who are independent contractors on a project-based system because of the nature of what we do. I paid myself from the beginning. But as I said transparently before, there were times when I could not pay myself temporarily. And I also do want to acknowledge the privilege of having numerous safety nets in place when I did leave my other full-time, not corporate, but public education job. And also at the time, my then husband was also a public educator with all of the benefits and stability that come along with that.
No, it's nothing. It's me. I had a high school intern help me out. I paid her.
I would say, did you have
I paid her.
interns?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have had one. She's about to graduate and go to Northeastern, so I'm gonna have to. I know, but yeah, me, and I'm about 2.5 years in, and I've been putting everything back in to Belonging Books. Yeah.
I'm still primarily putting everything back into our business. We have 5 part-time employees. I've been fortunate enough to find, or these people find me, that have other jobs that are also sustaining them. And so, one of our main employees, she works a preschool her first half of the day. That's her real, her main gig, and then she closes the store on the other half of the day. The other person who's our operations manager, her husband keeps the lights on. And so this is something that she gets to do every day. She's excited to come to work and help Brave run our business. And so, I don't know if that.
No, I mean, I think, and it's another thing that I hope we have a lot of conversations in the hallway about. I'll just say really quickly, myself and Christine count as full-time employees, but outside of the 2 of us who are the owners and we work the store, I have 2 full-time employees or full-time equivalency employees. And we keep everyone hourly for their flexibility because we have a lot of people with other life passions and passion projects, or they want the flexibility because they're the primary caregiver for their kids. Like our web order manager opens the store every 5 days a week so he can pick up his kids at the bus at 3, right? Like that works for his life, and he would rather be hourly and do that. Right. So part of that success is figuring out ways that have worked for things, and I think we finally have the right balance of part-time and full-time people. And then I have like 7 other people who work anything from 6 hours a week to 20 hours a week, and it's very complicated. I had to pay myself right away, and we started as a pop-up. It was me and 1 part-timer, because my career was not something stable before. It was also bookselling. I was a bookseller for 10 years before I opened my own store. Guess what? Not a lot of savings, but I've side hustled. I help people with their business management as a side hustle. I can plan a conference if I need to for a side hustle. So I was working 2 or 3 full-time jobs while also running my bookstore in order to do it. And so then after the pandemic, I'm currently not paying myself and living off of my side hustle in order to bring us up to a pay rate that is appropriate, and it is helping improve the store. And so my goal is to start paying myself again by the end of the year. Yeah. Let's talk about money, y'all. It's the only way we're going to fix it. But not in an antitrust way. Thank you all so much. I'm sure that was complicated and strange, but we appreciate you spending time with us this morning. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for your transparency. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the Bookstore Education Podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!